Today's episode is with Bonnie Viteri.
Security champions are members of the development team who really act as that extension of the security team. They keep their eyes and ears open for potential issues that might require security expertise. Hey, I've saw this on TV, or I heard this, or I watched this movie about cyber, and I'm interested in it. Like, can you tell me more? But the ideal security champion is really going to be someone that's embedded in the development team. Back in 1996, we actually started to build the security team, and the people then said, "Hey, we're just going to be known as the paranoid." It's really about the devs' growth and influencing and teaching them how to integrate the work into their daily habits, and then they initially provide those resources to their teams. So if you listen to leaders' problems and truly listen to their problems and what they have issues with, and then you help fix it or come with solutions. Every year I would start planning for the following year towards the end of Q2 and the beginning of Q4. And that's having those crucial conversations with leadership on
The champions are not doing the actual work, but rather they're making, they are influencing so that others can do the work. Hi everyone, this is Purushottam, and thanks for tuning into ScaleToZero podcast. Today's episode is with Bonnie Viteri. Bonnie designs security programs that make sense, turning complexity into clarity. Her strength lies in bridging the gap between technical teams, leadership, and addressing human risk with strategic and actionable programs. Uh, Bonnie, thank you so much for taking the time and joining me for today's podcast.
Yeah, thank you, Puri. Thanks for having me. Excited to be here and dive into this.
Absolutely love it. Before we kick off, do you want to add anything to your journey? Like, do you want to maybe highlight how did you get into it, or what do you like or don't like in your day to day today?
Yeah, absolutely. This is a great question because I'm actually considered a non-traditional engineer, which that basically just means that I don't have any classical cybersecurity training. My background's in behavioral psychology and criminology. So I had transferable skills and a work ethic and a passion for security that just always made me question, well, what could go wrong? So that's carried me pretty far. And I'm fortunate that I had great mentors and worked with a really great, intelligent people that I've been able to learn from and absorb their life force, I say. But I truly get to say that I wake up every morning and do what I love. And, who wouldn't want to do that?
Love that. Often what I have seen is majority of the folks who are in a specific domain, they have done academics or something like that in the same domain. But sometimes you have folks who are not have not done academics in the same domain, but excel really well because they bring in different perspective. So that helps a lot, right? And I'm hoping I can get some of that learning from you today during our conversation. So today's topic is focused on security championship program, how to build one, and in an effective way. So let's dive in. In one of the recent talks, you highlighted that security champions are not just about checking boxes, that hey, we just have security champions program, but they are more about building the influence and bridging the gap between security and development team, even leadership, to act as ambassadors. Now the question is, how do you define the role of a security champions?
Yeah, every program is different and every champion is different. But for me, it was, the industry. Security champions are members of the development team who really act as that extension of the security team. They keep their eyes and ears open for potential issues that might require security expertise. And so, while being well versed in security frameworks or best practices, champions really focus on integration, that execution, instead of just compliance. So they can understand the requirements for like a NIST or an IS2, but changing that into actionable, practical, scalable security strategies that are going to improve your security posture and position security as a competitive advantage. This is where they act as those islands to the teams, and they support properly to make basically the difference in that ever elusive shift left conversation.
So that's a very good way to sort of identify the role of a security championship program, a security champions program, and security champions. When you are trying to identify someone, let's say you're working with a development team, and you're trying to identify who should be my champion, what signals do you look for?
Obviously, somebody who is passionate about security. It's interesting. Sometimes you don't have to look for them. They'll come out of the woodwork and say, "Hey, I've saw this on TV, or I heard this, or I watched this movie about cyber, and I'm interested in it. Like, can you tell me more?" But the ideal security champion is really going to be someone that's embedded in the development team, understands their tech stacks, has that knowledge enough to be able to understand the concepts of security and how it interacts with their tech stacks and their goals, processes, culture, of course, but really just the passion. If they have a passion to do it, then I can teach you the rest, essentially. So that's kind of who I'm looking for.
Which makes sense, because at the end of the day, you have to not only learn about the security, what are the security risks, and how do you address some of it. At the same time, you need to have good understanding of technical skills as well, like what the team is working on or what the team is building. Can you give an example where you have seen someone maybe unexpected who grew into a powerful champion?
So let me rephrase that. So you're asking for like someone who kind of grew into a really powerful champion, like along their
Hmm.
journey.
Hmm.
Yeah, I wouldn't really say that that's unexpected. I'd say that, what I've noticed with some of the champions that I've worked with and, the 116 engineers I had the privilege of working with at Yahoo, it was
Hmm.
really like they were unaware of their secret powers. And so they might have been like doubtful in themselves or doubtful in like how to approach certain situations. And so basically, if they had I'll give the example of like one that had a hard time rolling information up to leadership. So, I started to notice that they knew their shit when it came to like technical and security and like infrastructure, but they just didn't
Hmm.
have that confidence to like walk into a room and say, "I know this answer and here's the solution that I propose." And so sometimes it's just about, really seeing where they might just need a little nudge or a little help, and then
Hmm.
being positive and staying on their side is a powerful thing. So it's just, you know, showing them that they can do it, this particular
Hmm.
person, that you do have the knowledge, you can do it. Maybe helping them with a pre-meeting, walking them through, hey, talk to me like I'm that person. But, everybody has a internal view of themselves and they need to get out of their head. So just reminding them of the things that they're really good at opens their eyes, and now I see that person who's an influential force. They can walk into a room, they articulate their ideas clearly, and they back it up with facts, and they contribute at a high level. So sometimes you just got to be a cheerleader and give them a push.
So, speaking of Yahoo, I think at Yahoo, the security team is called Paranoids, right? Or something like that. I don't know how that name came into place, but I see that often in blogs and all. And even some folks who I'm connected with, they also say, yeah, Paranoids. I don't know why, though.
Yeah,
I'm pretty sure there is a story behind it.
yeah. So actually, when I first started doing my talk and I knew I had to understand, like, how did we get to where we are, I had to roll it all
Hmm.
back and I did a timeline on it.
Hmm.
And back in 1996, we actually started to build the security team. And the people
Hmm.
then said, hey, we're just going to be known as the Paranoids. It's one of the very few branded security teams. We would go to conferences with our t-shirts and, the little keyhole logo, who's fantastic. And it's so basically, yeah, it started in 1996 at Yahoo and it just carried through and it became kind of a thing. And so now it's, stay paranoid, or once a paranoid, always a paranoid. So
Yeah.
once you've worked with that group of high level folks, like you understand how security teams should function.
Yeah, makes sense. Oh yeah, I mean 1996 is very early, like when it comes to security, enforcing security or following security, right? At that time, it was security was not the primary focus in a way,
Mhm.
so makes sense. One question, follow up question to your previous answer is, um, let's say you picked a security champion. How do you see them evolve in the organization, and what role do they play in influencing security decisions?
So it's always different. For basically, again, every organization, but man, I love this. I love this question. So I've seen it happen quite often when I was at Yahoo. So I realized that really by setting them up for success and providing like initial conversation documents that eventually that they could, use on their own is, what I mean by that is showing them how to be an influencer. You don't want them to be worker bees because that's when your program fails. If you're just trying to say, hey, I just need you to do security tasks to take this off my team's plate, they're going to just be like, whoa, whoa, whoa. But if you're really understanding kind of why am I in this program? Why do they want to be there? What do they want to learn? How can you help set them up for success? Here's some key talking points for your stand up. Here's the responses for leadership when you're working on the program, why it's relevant, what we're doing, how it aligns to the business and your product team needs. Here are the metrics that have impacted the company. And you actually achieved that. I didn't achieve that. You guys achieved that. So, it's going to save an all hands on deck issue at some point. You praise, you roll out, you roll up. It's really about the devs' growth and influencing and teaching them how to integrate the work into their daily habits. And then they initially provide those resources to their teams, and then you praise their efforts and they start walking the walk, I've said quite a few times, the more you give, the more you get back. And I've seen that tenfold.
Yeah, I love that. And I have seen that as well. Like the more you give, the more you get back. And it fits perfectly to security as well, right? Now the question is, we spoke about security champions, like how do you find, what are some of the skills and things like that. If we look at overall at a security champions program, uh, what are some of the principles that you that make a security champion program successful?
Um, it's always so it's always so different, right? And I talk to people about security champions programs all the time. We have the community of interest. We're working on the OWASP maturity model, and so principles that really make the program successful is, well, think about the evolution of a program, right? I mean, you can Google it. There's like tons of information out there to read on the evolution, but it's the foundational planning. Why are we setting up the program in the first place? What's the need? Like, who's the executive sponsor? Who are we talking to about this? What's it going to look like at the end of the day? Who are our ideal champions, right? The second thing that you really want to ensure is that you're following that evolution, right? So kind of once you get that foundational planning, you're going to jump into, all right, well, what's next? Here's the design. Then, okay, well, here's how we're going to maximize that design. And here's how we're going to go out and we're going to scale for purpose. And I am telling you, that is a game changer. So when you go to leadership and you say, hey, I want one of your team members for 20% of their time to come focus on security with me, they go, 20%? That's a lot. And I'm like, well, it ebbs and flows. You might have 10% this quarter, 5% next quarter. But being able to align that to the business, the product team goals, the security team goals, taking a step back, looking at that holistically, and then saying, okay, well, here's my security champion program goals for the year. Here's how we're going to get there. And then here's how I'm going to talk to the champions about influencing their team to understand these goals and like integrate it, right? So integrate it into their workflows, integrate it into their Jira sprints, and creating buy-in. So if you listen to leaders' problems and truly listen to their problems and what they have issues with, and then you help fix it or come with solutions, they're going to start to listen a little bit deeper.
Absolutely. I think one of the things that you highlighted, which I really liked, is like the exec sponsor, right? Like getting that buy-in early plays a huge role in the success of the program as well. Now the question is, let's say we have 20 people. We started the security champion program. Now, as we grow, like as the organization grows, how do you see security champion program grow as well? Like, what are some of the maybe challenges that organizations face as the organizations grow, and how do they overcome that?
Yeah, I laugh because every company has to be able to put forth resources if you really want to see it be successful. Even at Yahoo, I had only 50% of my time was allocated to the Security Champions program to lead it, and the other 50% was to do other jobs. But every year I would start planning for the following year towards the end of Q2
Hmm.
and the beginning of Q4. And that's having those crucial conversations with leadership on, okay, what's our goals in 2020, 2025? What's that strategy look like? What's the product team doing to align to that strategy? Okay,
Hmm.
well, I'm not going to take their time. I'm going to go and I'm going to search out their, team all hands, and I'm going to listen to that recorded video so that I can align the program to it.
Hmm.
Talking to security subject matter experts, talking to champions about their pain points from the previous year. Um, and then actually making good on my promises. Like, making that, you got to build that credibility at the end of the day. But
Yeah.
yeah, I would say if you're talking about evolving the program, you have to evolve it year over year. You have to take a step back and say, what are we doing this year? What are those success metrics? How am I going to talk about them? And executive leadership does play a big role for that buy-in. And depending on who that is, ours fell under product security. It was my director. Obviously, I didn't build the
Hmm.
original champions program. I kind of took it over. Um, but it's having them also have those high level conversations with their peers, but arming them with the information to be able to have those conversations. So the lead's role is not for the faint of heart. I will say
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. No, I can understand. Like often, security is seen as a roadblock, right? And when you are advocating for a security champion program and you are working across teams, you there would be pushback, right? So I can totally see why that would be a challenging position to be in. Uh, so every organization, every team also has a north star in a way, right? So do you have a specific checklist that you follow that can act as a north star for organizations when you are thinking about incorporating or scaling security champions program?
So the North Star for when scaling a champions program. Okay, I'm just thinking through this one because that's a really great question. Obviously, when you're scaling, like I had said before, it's scale for purpose.
Hmm.
For us or for me, that jump to the cloudy sky, yeah, yeah, getting all of our data from on-prem to the cloud, what was the
Hmm.
reason? And so when I started thinking about how we're migrating to the cloud. Every product now needs a security review.
Hmm.
Okay, they came to me and said, "Can we use the champions to like help do these reviews?" Well, let's set them up for success. What does that look like? So we're going to build the process. We're going to say, all right, you're going to be influencers. You're not going to be doing the reviews. Let's train you on the process. Here's the targeted training. Here's the information that you relay. Here's all the resources. And really, the cherry on top was when they started owning it, which was a lot of fun, and watching them grow and say, I get this now. Like I get why it's
Hmm.
important. And I want to say almost every team that actually did the security view for the migration, their champion was consulted, and they knew where to go and how to get the information. And so when you showed that return on investment, where it was less
Hmm.
time for the product teams to migrate, our products were more secure because they were doing them correctly, the recommendations were getting integrated into their Jira sprints. So they made
Hmm.
sure that they were there. Like, that's just when you take a step back and you go, they don't need me anymore. essentially, they're good to go. But and I don't know if that's regular for all programs. I've only really had the privilege of building one, um,
Hmm.
but I've consulted on many, and I've seen their blockers. And I think the miss is when you try to make them just workers and not influencers,
Hmm.
and you actually don't set them up for success. So those are the two big key components.
I love the example that you gave, right? How, when you were migrating to cloud, how you approached it and how you picked the champions and what type of role they were playing in it. They were not doing the actual work, rather they were influencing and things like that. So you have done the security champions program at Yahoo scale. For do you see any difference if a startup, let's say startup thinks about incorporating a security champion program? Are there any differences in building a program at a smaller scale and a larger scale like Yahoo?
Yeah, like I said, I really haven't had the privilege of doing one at a startup quite yet. But There's two major differences that I can immediately identify. And the larger companies, like I'll just use Yahoo because that's, what I know the best. That was legacy. Many people came before me to start building that program. We had satellite champions, then we went to, security, then security champions, then we went to deputy paranoids. And so I had to go in and do deep research on why did those programs not succeed? How can I change that perception of leadership? How can
Mm-hmm.
I address it in a different manner? And it's just thinking differently and talk to as many people as you can and get their perception, right? Because you want to change perception on, hey, these do work. It is effective. At a
Mm-hmm.
startup, it's a little different because you're probably starting greenfield. You're probably starting with word of mouth, and you know, the original purpose of your program is to just spread the good word of security. It's everyone's job. It's not just the
Mm-hmm.
security teams. We got to keep our stuff safe. Um, and then you start to move into that foundational planning. Who's the best candidates? How many do we need based on the size? So it all goes back to that evolution of a program. And that's the recommendation I would give to a startup. What I've seen with the startups that I've consulted for has
Mm-hmm.
been that they don't allocate enough resources for their lead. The lead might have 10% of their time. Well, you get back what you put in. And if you're only
Mm-hmm.
giving 10%, you're only going to get probably 5. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
um, yeah. So, find that passionate lead that wants to do it. And
Mm-hmm.
I will say for anybody considering taking on the lead, uh, well, here's it. I could never decide if I wanted to be an IC or a manager. I could never decide on my path. And so when you lead a program like Security Champions, you get to merge
Mm-hmm.
those two and you get to do both. So you get to be an IC and kind of hide in the bushes and do your work and get your hands dirty. And you also get to manage and lead and be inspirational and show people what they love. And so if that's what you're looking for, then you'll make a good lead.
I love how you sort of merge the IC and manager role in this case, right? Because often as engineers, we want to stay in our lane. That hey, I'm an engineer, I just want to do hands-on work, or I'm a manager, then I'm not doing any hands-on work. But this gives you sort of best of both worlds, where you can be a hands-on engineer and at the same time you can lead a program and show your influence to rest of your team and the organization as well. Love that. So we spoke about executive sponsors and leadership buy-in, right? Uh, Something that really resonated with me from one of your talks is how you tie the security programs, champions program, to business outcomes, because ultimately organizations are trying to achieve some business outcomes so that they can make money and grow. Now, often in that process, security is seen as a blocker or overhead, and we spoke about perception, how we can change the perception. How do you ensure that the initiatives like champion security champions program aligns with business and product goals? Because ultimately, if you can show that alignment, then you will get executive buy-in or funding or the resources and things like that, right? How do you ensure that happens?
Witchcraft, essentially.
Oh yeah, that's the secret.
That's the secret. Yeah, and that goes back to that yearly planning, right?
Hmm.
So, what's the business strategy? What's the product strategy? What's the security strategy? How do we bridge all those gaps to have a really good program strategy? And
Hmm.
so every year over year, you have to do that research. And, you have to have communication and interest. And when I say that, sincerely have communication, over communicate, and then interest in what they're doing. If you don't know, ask. I found that actually one of my very first mentors told me one of the things that she loved about me was that I would just go to a CEO and spark up a conversation, ask him what his pain points were. How could and so
That's an amazing skill.
and mostly I would do it unknowingly because but yeah, and it's gotten me a long way. I think just trying, and I know that's not everybody's strength, is that personable bridge gap. It actually was something that I put a lot of effort into learning. But really, truly, genuinely trying to make security easy for them to understand, easy for them to use, easy for them to integrate. So speaking their language, how do they like to be communicated with? What are their pain points? And then ensuring that you follow up on those pain points. If you say you're going to do it, you do it. And sometimes
Okay.
the feedback's hard to hear. I would do an end of year survey to the security champions and the security champions leaders every year. And I
Mm-hmm.
would take those metrics and I would, aggregate them and I would read the testimonials and feedback. And I'd be like, some of them would be like, man, okay, I didn't know, but now I know. So let's fix that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and the best part about that survey was I would get like 98% response rate. And
Oh, lovely.
it was honestly because I showed genuine interest and they
Mm-hmm.
knew that if they told me, then I was going to go out and I was going to try to find that answer. Even if I couldn't fix the problem, I would let them know, where it stood. So
Mm-hmm.
that's kind of how I would say like aligning to business goals is do your research, TLDR, do your research, have those conversations, even if they're difficult, request the feedback, and then always have your success metrics every year to prove that you are bettering the program every year.
Uh, I love how you structured them. So, speaking of metrics, do you follow a specific metrics to show not only alignment but also progress?
Yeah, and metrics come in that when you're talking about that developmental evolution of a program, that cyclical program stage, which, is anywhere from 1, 3 to 5 years. But
Mm-hmm.
when you're talking about metrics, that first year with, okay, I've talked to everybody, I know the pain points. Here's the top 3 things we're going to do in the program this year. And that's,
Mm-hmm.
elevate, maybe it's onboard all of our repos to GitHub and or
Mm-hmm.
a SaaS tool or whatever we're doing here. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and then maybe it's how do we prove influence, which is what my first talk on is. If you listen to the talk from Lisbon, it's
Mm-hmm.
about expanding that influence. And then how do you actually metricize that? So you want to be able to talk in qualitative and quantitative. And
Mm-hmm.
so what does that look like? And so every year it would be, for me, one of the big metrics that I had is, okay, we scaled. Nobody thought we would. Challenge accepted, but we did. We scaled for purpose. So that was one of my first metrics is can we scale company wide? The second
Mm-hmm.
metric after that, so we've got our champions now. So what are we
Mm-hmm.
going to do with them? What's our success metrics? What does leadership want us to do? Okay,
Mm-hmm.
well, we're going to build an on-demand training. We're going to drop it into the source of truth, which, whatever your training platform is. How many of my champions went and took that training? And then after they took the training, how many of them went and was able to take that, the communication and implement it into their, like whether it was Slack, stand up, one-on-ones, whatever it was. And so those
Mm-hmm.
were my other 2 metrics is did they take the training? Are they communicating the training? That shows influence. If people were doing like, so basically onboarding the repos, what I found out was 80% of the repos that were onboarded were actually done by team members, not a champion. And that's how I know that they were influencing.
Nice. Okay. So the champions are not doing the actual work, but rather they are making like they are influencing so that others can do the work, and that sort of shows the progress or success of the security champions program. Love that.
Enabling and empowering. Yeah. So,
Yeah.
and you have to be creative with your metrics, but be able to back those metrics up. So if you say, this is how I'm showing influence and impact, define what that influence and impact is, and then
Yeah.
show the metric that's associated with it.
Makes sense. So one one more question on this on the security champions program is uh, on the metrics and things like that. If you have leaders who understand the value of security, it's much easier, right? We got this question from our friend Dustin Lair, who is asking, who wants to know this from you, like how can we make our security champion programs more data driven and demonstrate clear ROI for the non-believers? Because if you have your execs who understand and believe, then it's much easier. But what if they don't believe in this whole security champions program? How do you do it in that case?
Oh, Dustin, let me give a shout out to Catalyst here. We're actually working on a gamification case study together. So Dustin and I are good buddies. But yeah, non-believers, great word for it. I like to say to have metrics is to make metrics, right? So, and
Hmm.
this goes back to that foundational and yearly planning again: design, grow, engage, implement, execute, and
Hmm.
then ensure the future optimization. So that's the metrics part. So, the strategy planning again, if you don't know, go find out. Again, what's the business plan for security? You don't know, Slack channel, CISO, CTO, find it out, and then align that program with it. So once you make the metrics, and like I said,
Hmm.
every company is different, program's different, culture's different, you have to be able to report them out.
Hmm.
So building what I call an executive steering committee. So that's going to be people from leadership that we have security, so engineering leadership. It's going to
Hmm.
be developers and engineers that might not be champions, but they have a really good idea of what's needed for your tech stacks and securing them.
Hmm.
Security SMEs, and then your executive sponsor. And then always, I would invite the CISO as optional.
Hmm.
And Sean Zadek was really active at Yahoo, but every year he did come to the end of year readout. So being able to put those metrics into beautiful graphs, a great deck, and speak to them intelligently and be prepared for hard questions about the baseline of those metrics. So, you
Hmm.
know, here was the baseline. Here's how we grew. Here's where we're at. Here's how we're going to get better next year. And so it's just, 5, 6 slides, previous year, current year, next year. And,
Hmm.
and then just sit back and wait for them to, you know, ask you how you performed the witchcraft.
Yeah, makes sense. So one of the things that you have mentioned multiple times today is the yearly planning or yearly review, end of the year review, and things like that, which makes me think that its Security Champions program is not a one-time activity. You have to continuously do it every year. I was thinking we'll just do it, set it once, and then forget it, and we are good. So in that case, how do you keep this program like fresh and scalable and relevant as your organization grows? Any tips and tricks, tips or tricks that you have for that?
Yeah. When we're thinking about I always think of it, any program, and any
Mm-hmm.
evolution of a program, like I've said a million times, the evolution of a program, it's cyclical.
Mm-hmm.
And so every year it's going to change. Like you can't say, all right, I'm going to train them on the OWASP top 10. And then 5 years later, you're still training them on OWASP top 10 from 5 years previous, because that's not the case any longer.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to refresh your content. I always like to also, well, what are the threats that are actively attacking my company? So make it applicable to your company. Make it applicable to, what you're seeing. Is it phishing? Is it smishing? Is it perimeter? And then, align some goals to that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, there's a lot of ways to kind of keep it active and keep it engaged.
Mm-hmm.
Community. What are the conversations we're going to have? Who are the speakers? What do the champions want to hear about? How can I make sure that I'm touching on all these different points? So when I did my foundational planning, it was 1, 3, and 5 years. I noticed that it had to be refreshed yearly for content. And then engagement is, those touch points, those check-ins, the one-on-ones, the 15 minutes that you make. If you have 100, I had 116 engineers, and I knew every single one of them personally. I knew what their goals, what their wants, what their dreams were, why they were in the program, and then
Mm-hmm.
making plans to nurture that. Again, give more than you give back. So every cyclical program is going to be different, but
Mm-hmm.
you might have to refresh 1 year. You might have to refresh 3. If you're going past a 3-year refresh, then you're behind the game.
That Yeah, that is so true, because security is ever evolving, right? And you have to stay ahead of it in a way. Um, One of the question that is slightly related to this, and we got this question from Anshuman Bhartiya, is let's say you have laid out the security program, champions program. at the beginning of the year, you have picked the security champions. How do you what's the secret in keeping security champions engaged and happy, so that they continue to not only learn but also influence in the right way?
Whew, that's a loaded question. Engaged and happy. That's such what's the word I'm looking for? Specific to the person, right?
Hmm.
And so, but seriously, it is just giving back more than you ask for. It is, this is what I've really noticed in today's culture is that starting a relationship is easy. Um, Actually continuing and nurturing relationships is very difficult. Like family, work, priorities, all that 15-minute one-on-one check-in with my champion, oh, I can push that. I can push that. But you can't, because that's where your relationships are built. That's where it's formed. That's where you understand how to keep them engaged and what they want from the program. So, okay, you want to speak at a conference? Let's work on that. You want to get a promotion, and that's why you did this program. Okay, well, let's focus on the next steps to get there. Have you talked to your leader? Where are you in the promotion cycle? Like, do you want to be an IC? Do you want to be a manager? Let's chat through what that looks like. You want to switch to security? All right, well, which pillar of security? Oh, you didn't know
Hmm.
that there are quite a few pillars of security. Well, here's some resources for you to do some research. Let me know, and we'll dig deeper together. So the more questions you ask and the more time you take and the more genuine and sincere you are, the more they're going to start. And sometimes I'll never forget this one girl. She was a tough nut to crack, and man, she was very constructive criticism. And I actually valued that, because sometimes people
Hmm.
get nervous to like actually tell you what they're thinking. And it took me a long time. I'd say almost 8 months to like finally crack her
Wow.
down to just being like, why are you in the program? And the
Hmm.
first time I asked, she said, my boss made me.
Oh, wow.
6 months later, well, why are you still in the program? Well, I really learned a lot. Okay. 9 months later, why are you in the, I'm drinking the Kool-Aid at this point. So it's really like just continuing and being, persuasive. And I love that. I love always finding people that challenge me. And
Hmm.
that drives me too. So
Makes sense. And if you like, from your example, right, you converted, not maybe converted is a strong word, but you made someone believe in the program, right? Maybe early on it was because someone else just assigned that work to them, they had to do it. But by ninth month they could see the value. They were believers at that time that, yeah, this program has value and this program will deliver value in longer term as well. So that's amazing. So one last question on this is, like earlier you touched on it, right? Like, as a security champion, you would have to do both the types of work. Like, you are an individual contributor, you are doing your own work, but at the same time you're doing you're learning about security, you're influencing your team and things like that, which often brings burnout, right, to the individuals. How do you prevent that from happening?
yeah, man, burnout is real, right? Especially in this fast-paced environment, and in tech, it happens very, very frequently. So,
Hmm.
the most you can do as a lead is be supportive. I would always, if I would do quarterly Jira tickets with like a security task or some
Hmm.
communication for them to take back, and I would always say in the ticket, if you don't have time to do this, move it to done. Let me know why, or if they would move it to done, I'd be like, just to check in, like, hey, you doing okay? But just be supportive. If you're swamped this month, hey, I get it. Take the time you need, focus, ping me when you want to catch up. I'm here for you.
Hmm.
If I can help alleviate any sort of pressure, can I get you connected to someone? Have you talked to your manager? Do you want to do a quick run through on what that conversation might sound like? You know, Empathy, caring, be kind, offer support. You know, champions that are normally active that go quiet, you might want to just reach out, and sometimes just listening and offering a friendly ear. It's really just what someone might need. So you never know what someone's going through. So just
Yeah.
kindness and empathy.
Absolutely. That's a great tool to have. Uh, You touched on recognition earlier, like for the security champions, and you slightly touched on gamification, community building, and things like that. Can you give some examples? Like, how do you recognize the work of a security champion, or what type of gamification have you seen work? If you can give some examples for our audience.
Yeah, I love this question too. So the entire program, your basis should be recognition and appreciation. I mean, these people
Mm-hmm,
are giving you extra time that
mm-hmm,
they may not actually have to do something that's technically a volunteer role. And
right.
so they're learning a new skill, they're showing up, they're changing the way their teams think. They're getting outside their comfort zone. Every single accomplishment should be celebrated. So roll it up to leadership, shout out on your internet, help them write a resume blurb about the program that they're in. Give them a LinkedIn badge. Let them know that, okay, let's involve you in a case study. Let's involve you in some more security work. If they ask for it, help them.
Mm-hmm,
Gamification, I'm going to get back to you on that one. That goes back to Catalyst and Dustin Lear. We're
right.
working on that to see. We're doing a little case study on that. But if you don't know about Catalyst, definitely check them out.
Mm-hmm,
Um, but community building, that should happen organically. So if you're talking to people in the industry, if you're bringing in topics and speakers that the champions want to hear, which was always a question on my end of the year form, what would you like to hear about next year? And just constant chatter in your champions Slack channel if you have one, and stay involved. You want them to be involved. The investment that you put in, they're going to give back, and you're going to get a return on investment for it. So it's really always appreciate, all the time. One of my favorites was if you would see something they were working on, in another channel, or
Mm-hmm,
maybe in like a locked channel that, hey, we just had 98% X, Y, and Z. And then
mm-hmm,
throwing that out to the whole champions program of like,
yeah.
hey, look at what they're working on. This is awesome. Even if it's not security related,
Mm-hmm.
it shows you're watching.
Yeah. So when you are like do that in public, so that others can also see the value, and the champions also feel appreciated for the efforts that they are putting in. And the key word that you use is volunteers, right? It's not their primary job, but they are trying to volunteer and help push the security program further. So yeah, makes sense. Doing the recognition in the public would definitely make them feel um, valued for contributing into the security program. So the last question I have around security, not on the champion program, but security as a whole, like at the end of the day, it comes down to security culture in the organization, right? And what type of culture do you have in the organization that defines success of some of these programs as well. And that also means that you need to have collaboration of security team with all other teams, like whether it's engineering or leadership or finance or any other team. Oh, what are some of the approaches that you have seen which help breaking that gap between security and development, so that there is better collaboration when it comes to security topics? What have you seen work?
Yeah, collaboration. That's so many different types of collaboration, right? So
Mm-hmm,
it's a loaded question a little bit. I like it though. So when I'm thinking about like breaking down silos and making sure you're collaborating effectively, right? So it's,
mm-hmm,
some teams prefer to work in a silo. Some teams have to, like some security efforts you just can't talk about, right? Sensitive nature.
mm-hmm,
And then, your company culture, you've really got to understand. But what I've personally seen effective is like, okay, why are we collaborating? How is this going to make your team's life easier? What are the key points? What's the overarching vision? Who needs to be in the room? Who are the stakeholders? Okay, well, if you're not the stakeholder, who do you think would be really great to like collaborate on this? And so
mm-hmm,
I remember when I was trying to figure out like the best way to prioritize cloud migration security alerts, and like prioritizing the recommendations that we were giving them to implement.
mm-hmm,
I talked to so many people, like the champions, the leaders, the cloud SMEs. What's the pain points? Let's do a quick brainstorming. Having that curious mind will get you a long way, but then also structuring it. So, never putting a collaboration on a calendar without an agenda. Um, that's
Mhm.
the quickest way to get overlooked. So
Yeah, yeah.
being very specific, and that's true for any job function. You have to earn respect, deliver on promises, follow up and be appreciative, make time to pay it forward, own your mistakes, fail, pivot faster. So if one thing's not working, let's pivot. How are we going to do that?
Yeah.
And I'll tell you that building credibility and to some extent political capital, they're two things that are so difficult to obtain, but so easy to lose. So,
Lose, yeah.
stay consistent. That's my biggest. Put that out there. Be consistent.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's funny that you mentioned, right? Like, the example that you gave of agenda, like when you're setting up some time with someone having a clear agenda, we see that so often. It's such a small thing, right, to do, but it has a huge impact. And it goes back to like the trust that you build with the person or the team and things like that. Some of these small things play major role in that. One I think I said last question, but I have one more question around it.
Go.
What challenges do you see when you are trying to foster collaboration between security and engineering, and what have you seen over?
Yeah, challenges. It's always a little bit different. So I actually get this question a lot with like, champions losing interest or challenges that you have with leadership or how do you keep it fresh,
Hmm.
But it really boils down to communication. You know, the challenges that I've noticed or, the programs that I've seen not be able to move things forward is, not being collaborative, not having that open communication, not asking teams what they want, but just assuming what they want. Um, you know, don't be afraid to be the squeaky wheel sometimes. Like everything might take precedence, but um, you really are trying to make things better. And so framing it in a this is what you get from it.
Hmm.
I'm trying to help you. And so that really helps overcome the challenges when you also frame it in their language. So leadership, dollars and cents, show me the business value. Product teams, meantime, like, start talking that dev language. And
Yeah.
they all speak a different language. It's taken me 10 years to learn to speak developer. Learn to speak engineer is what I've called it. But yeah, I never look at it as a challenge, look at it as an opportunity and something
Hmm.
that you can overcome and then figure it out. I always think we're all smart people at the end of the day. It's how much effort are you willing to put in? So I
Yeah.
love that question, by the way.
So I love your answer because I think I was recently listening to a podcast where CTO of Facebook he said that communication is the job. Like ultimately, you are going to collaborate with multiple teams. You will never be working in silos throughout your life, right? You will be collaborating with others. So communication is your job in that case, because how do you use the language that they understand? How do you use the right metrics, or how do you yeah, like how do you communicate with the other team? That plays a major role than your actual I mean, your actual work also has an equal weightage, but communication also plays equal has equal weightage. Like that's where he was like, communication is your job in a way. So yeah, that's what I love your answer in this case. Um, so that brings us to the end of the security questions. Thanks, Bonnie, for the lovely conversation. Here are a few points which stood out for me. The first one is some of the signals to look for while trying to find who would be a security champion is to see their interest in security, their knowledge of tech stack, and also understanding of how they integrate with each other. The second one is enablement and empowerment are two key factors of success when it comes to security champions program. This not only helps security champions to learn, but also influence security programs as they grow with it. The last one is while designing security champions program, do a yearly planning, make it goal driven, and define success metrics. And in order to evaluate at the end of the year, perform deep retrospection or to understand what is the impact of the program and also what are some of the areas for improvement. Thank you. Before I let you go though, I have one last question. which is around any recommendation, reading recommendation that you have for our audience. It could be like a blog or a book or a podcast or anything that you think our audience can get value out of.
Yeah, love this too. So let's go back to that communication. There is a book by Stephen Covey, and I love Stephen Covey. I actually start all of my conference talks with a quote by him. But crucial conversations. So it's basically mastering difficult discussions. Where stakes are high, opinions differ. Emotions run strong. How can you improve your relationships? The health of the program, your career. It really emphasizes that importance of like creating a safe space for dialogue and understanding different perspectives and then working together to achieve common goals. So like it's a powerful and poignant book, and it provides a
Hmm.
framework for navigating those difficult conversations in a way that forms understanding, builds relationships, and just leads to better problem solving. So yeah, I can't say enough about it. So
Yeah, I love that recommendation. Thank you so much for doing that. When we publish the episode, we'll add it to the show notes so that our audience can also go in and read and learn to have the difficult conversations, hopefully in an easier way. Uh, so yeah, thank you so much, Bonnie, for coming to the podcast and sharing your knowledge around Security Champions program, how to collaborate, how do you stay, how do you find security champions, and how do you foster relationships and things like that. Thank you so much for your time.
yeah, thanks for having me, and it's been a great conversation. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Uh, Thank you, and to our audience, thank you so much for watching. See you in the next episode.